Welcome to Thrive with Pride by AgeOptions, an inclusive online space for LGBT+ older adults and those who care for them. This is a recording of a live event held on Zoom, which included a Q&A segment that was not recorded. This Pride Month, we welcomed Molly Fulop, who took our group on a specially curated LGBTQ+ virtual gallery tour, centered around the theme, How have LGBTQ+ people used art and creative expression to communicate with each other? Molly is an educational psychology doctoral student at UIC and a graduate research assistant for the LGBTQ+ Intergenerational Dialogue Project. Their work explores LGBTQ+ intergenerational collaborative art making and Florida Art Museum's role in combating LGBTQ+ censorship. They received a Master of Arts in Art Education from the School of the Art Institute in 2023. Please see the video description below for a PDF of their slides and other helpful resources.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be with you today. I've got a little script, so if you see me looking around, flipping some pages, just want to make sure I stay on time because I could talk about these things for a while if you let me. So like Nina mentioned, I am a second-year doctoral student at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and a graduate research assistant for the LGBTQ+ Intergenerational Dialogue Project. And for new faces here, the Dialogue Project brings together LGBTQ+ young adults and older folks for themed dialogue, storytelling, and art making. I've personally been a member of the project since 2021, and I've used that time to research the positive impacts of intergenerational collaborative art making on the project's members. Alongside this work, I've partnered with 2 Florida art museums to create and facilitate LGBTQ+ arts-based programming that help connect local queer youth to the histories and communities that have been kept from them as a result of the Florida Board of Education's passing of the Don't Say Gay bill and other legislation like it. As a queer person from Florida, this work is really important to me because of the opportunities I've had to explore my identities and come into the LGBTQ+ communities in Florida and here in Chicago through making art and the relationships I've formed through the Dialogue Project. I want to be a part of the effort to ensure that other young LGBTQ+ people can be celebrated for how they express themselves and see that it's possible to become thriving LGBTQ+ elders. So in this virtual gallery tour today, I'm going to be sharing a few examples of how LGBTQ+ people have used art and creative expression to communicate with each other over time. To start, I'll share my thinking behind this theme before moving on to the artworks. These examples will be presented in chronological order, and there will be time for any questions at the end. Like Nina mentioned, please feel free to put any kind of questions or comments in the chat as we go, and I'll have a reference page at the end and a link to a full version of this tour that you can find on YouTube if you want to explore any of these artworks further. But let's get started. If it will let me go. There we go. All right, so for today's tour, I was primarily guided by the question, how are we as LGBTQ+ people and our wider community being seen by those in and outside the community? How can we control the images and ideas that are created by or about us in order to tell our own stories? And lastly, how are we talking to each other as a community, and what kind of languages do we use? The key words of this presentation are representation, perception, and internal and external communication, which grew from these questions to get at how LGBTQ+ people have used art to shape our understandings of what it means to be, look, or act gay, queer, LGBTQ+, whichever label fits best for you, and how we navigate the world as LGBTQ+ people, acknowledge and connect with each other. This theme also addresses the ways in which our community has historically communicated with each other through coded language, clothing items, fashion styles, and different symbols or iconography like pansies, the character Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and the pink triangle. The majority of these artworks are sourced from 2 really great LGBTQ+ art history books from 2019, which the titles are here at the bottom. It's Art and Queer Culture, edited by Catherine Lord and Richard Meyer, and Queer X Design, 50 years of signs, symbols, banners, logos, and graphic art of LGBTQ by Andy Campbell. So the first artwork I'll be talking about today is Richard Bruce Nugent's Smoke, Lilies, and Jade, which is a prose poem published in the first and only issue of Fire in 1926. Richard Bruce Nugent was a Black gay writer and artist who's considered one of the writing luminaries of the Harlem Renaissance, alongside close friends Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, Wallace Thurman, and Countee Cullen, if those names sound familiar. Born to middle-class socialites in Washington, D.C., Nugent first moved to Harlem at 13 years old. After expressing his desire to become a writer at 18, Nugent's mother sent him back to D.C. to live with family while he pursued his passion. While in D.C., Nugent attended Harlem Renaissance poet and playwright Georgia Douglas Johnson's salon to mingle and connect with other writers, artists, and intellectuals. It was at Johnson's salon that Nugent met and became friends with Langston Hughes. This friendship and the excitement of returning to Harlem eventually convinced Nugent to move back to Harlem in 1925, where he was quickly taken in by the other luminaries. These friends often hosted their own salons in William Thermos's apartment, and Fire was born out of these conversations. Getting back to Smoke, Lilies, and Jade, Nugent's prose poem is considered one of the first examples of a Black gay man publishing openly about his sexuality and homosexuality more generally, though Nugent dropped his last name from the author's signature to avoid potentially harming his family's reputation. Speaking through the character of Alex in this poem, a thoughtful young Black gay man wandering New York City, Nugent describes finding both men and women beautiful and admits to readers that he finds himself relating more and more to Oscar Wilde and his ideas about the beauty of the male figure. To close, I wanted to be sure to also include an example of one of the drawings Nugent contributed to Fire, seen here on the right, to give you a sense of his more visual artwork as well. Our next artwork is Bob Miser's magazine, Physique Pictorial, and the subjective character analysis chart that Miser developed and distributed alongside the magazine. The image on the left is Physique Pictorial's inaugural cover, designed by the famed white gay erotic illustrator Tama Finland in 1957. This cover, featuring bare-chested Scandinavian loggers, was Tama Finland's first illustration distributed in the United States and is thought to have sparked his national popularity. Getting back to Physique Pictorial, this magazine grew out of white gay photographer Bob Miser's Athletic Model Guild, a photography studio and talent agency Miser opened in 1945 and operated out of the home he shared with his mother near Venice Beach in Los Angeles, California. Miser found ready models in the bodybuilders and aspiring actors who visited the beach and eventually gained enough popularity to start the magazine in the early 50s. Physique Pictorial was marketed as a health and fitness magazine to get around the laws prohibiting the distribution of obscene material through the mail at the time, but those in the know were aware of the magazine's true purpose. The distribution of nude male photographs through the mail was later repealed following the 1962 ruling of Manual Enterprises versus the Supreme Court. Following this repeal, Miser began inserting copies of the subjective character analysis chart seen here on the right. Using these charts, subscribers to the magazine were able to match the symbols and the accompanying character traits they described to the symbols that Miser added to the photographic prints to get a sense of the personality of whoever was pictured. These charts added an additional comedic or erotic undertone to the images, as subscribers were able to better imagine what the subject was like. Miser created two versions of these charts, one of which was printed and widely distributed with copies of the magazine, and another that Miser hand wrote and personally sent out to longtime supporters, which often included more sexually explicit descriptions. Physique Pictorial ended its original run in 1990, ahead of Miser's passing in 1992. Physique Pictorial was recently relaunched by the Bob Miser Foundation and releases quarterly issues highlighting contemporary LGBTQ plus photographers. The next two artworks I'll be talking about are these posters made by Peter Hujar on the left and Sue Negrin and Sue Bevier on the right. I chose to discuss both images together to highlight how one image can be used to communicate different messages. The images these posters have in common is the group of people walking in arm together down a street, some of whom have their fists raised and are smiling at each other or the camera. This group of people are members of the Gay Liberation Front, an LGBTQ plus rights activist group that formed shortly after the Stonewall riots. And this photograph was taken by Peter Hujar for the Gay Liberation Front's recruitment flyer to advertise the Christopher Street Liberation Day March they organized to celebrate the Stonewall riots' first anniversary. Peter Hujar was a noted gay white photographer who, while not a member of the Gay Liberation Front, was partners with one of the front's co-founders, Jim Forrett, who can be seen in this photograph in the light-toned striped pants on the right with his fist in the air. In this recruitment flyer, the Gay Liberation Front uses the phrase "come out," both to encourage people to come out to the Liberation Day March and to come out and join the larger LGBTQ plus community. In Sue Negrin and Sue Bevier's poster on the right, "come out" has been replaced with the words "let go" in a spiraling pattern at the center of a psychedelic red mandala, layered behind a purple reprinting of the original photograph. The word "front" has also been dropped, leaving the image to be captioned as "Gay Liberation." Here, the Gay Liberation Front members are being used to simultaneously represent the organization and to create an image of what gay liberation might look like. The latter idea calls back to the use of "let go" in the mandala, as Negrin and Bevier are encouraging viewers to let go of anything that is holding them back from embracing their queerness and joining the cause for LGBTQ plus rights. Sue Negrin and Sue Bevier's aesthetic choices also play a role in sending this message, as they deliberately invoke colors and symbols that would connect them to other leftist and social activist movements at the time, such as their use of red related to the socialist movement, the inclusion of the mandala related to the peace movement, and the group members' raised fists related to the civil rights movement. While I couldn't find much more information about Negrin or Bevier, I was able to learn that Sue Negrin produced and distributed copies of this posters and others through her publishing house called Times Change Press, and Sue Bevier is in Hujar's photo and can be seen standing next to Jim Forrett on the far right. So right here, if my little cursor is doing its job. Our fourth artwork on this tour is Hal Fisher's Signifiers for a Male Response from the series Gay Semiotics. Semiotics is the study of how meaning is created and communicated through signs, each consisting of a form, or a signifier, and what that form represents, or the signified. In Signifiers for a Male Response, Hal Fisher exposes and names the coded accessories LGBTQ plus men often wore to identify and discreetly communicate with each other. The overall appearance of Fisher's model also references the Castro clone aesthetic adopted by LGBTQ plus men in the 70s. This aesthetic grew out of San Francisco's historically queer Castro neighborhood and involved LGBTQ plus men reappropriating masculine attire like uniforms, leather, or Levi jeans and flannel, and stylings like full mustaches and sideburns. This aesthetic became so popular that men who adopted it were thought of as clones because of their similar appearances. Hal Fisher is a white gay photographer, art critic, and museum professional who moved to the Castro in 1975 and began documenting his friends and neighbors. Gay Semiotics grew out of Fisher's interest in how queer people were creating and using their own signs and symbols, though Fisher chose not to take this work too seriously. Instead, Fisher uses the series to comment on semiotics' reliance on a person's ability to correctly interpret the sign or symbol they are presented with by highlighting the need for someone to have the necessary knowledge to understand the message being shown. Through gay semiotics, Fisher creates an ironic visual explainer that may leave viewers questioning their own assumptions and encounters with LGBTQ plus aesthetics, styles, and methods of coded communication. For example, in his description of the purpose and varied meanings of the hanky code, Fisher says that handkerchiefs are also employed in the treatment of nasal discharge, and in some cases might have no significance in regard to sexual contact. Our final artwork on this tour is Arari Sabasu's cover design for the fall 1978 issue of Azalea, a magazine by third world lesbians featuring a red silhouette in profile with an implied earring of interlocking Venus symbols. Azalea was started by Black lesbian writers, publishers, and editors Joan Gibbs, Robin Christian, and Linda Brown for the express purposes of creating a circulating periodical by and for queer women of color to combat their suppression in the publishing industry and establish a sense of national and international community. Gibbs, Christian, and Brown named the magazine after one of the first flowers to bloom in spring to evoke the image of a spot of color within a field of white, much like how they hoped the magazine would serve as a space for queer women of color amidst the white supremacy upheld by the publishing industry, the wider LGBTQ plus community, and society overall. Their use of the now outdated term third world is similarly multifaceted, as it's meant to describe how queer women of color's intersectional identities influence their experiences and to reclaim the typically pejorative term to use to describe African, Asian, and South American countries. Gibbs, Christian, and Brown strove to make the magazine accessible and inclusive by instituting a sliding subscription price that funded the distribution of free copies to incarcerated subscribers and a hard no editing policy that avoided subjecting contributors to the publishing industry's oppressive revision processes. Irari Sabasu described herself as a West Indian Amazon, a poet, and an artist who was a longtime volunteer at the Lesbian Herstory Archives in Brooklyn, New York, and a member of the Salsa Soul Sisters, one of the oldest Black lesbian and lesbians of color womanist organizations in the United States. Like Fire and Physique Pictorial, Azalea highlights a more literal method of communication between queer people and further expands our understanding of art as a vehicle for sharing our thoughts, feelings, and lives with each other. But that's all I have for this tour. Again, thank you so much for spending some of your morning with me, and I'm really excited to getting into our discussion and our Q&A. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're interested in learning anything more, I've got the link to the full virtual tour here that I'll be sending to Nina, as well as my references. And if you want to learn more about the Dialogue Project, you can find us on social media or at our Instagram and website. So that's all I have.
Thanks again to Molly for joining us this Pride Month. Don't forget to check out the video description below for slides from their presentation and other helpful resources. We hope that you will join us again on July 23rd as we learn how to be a dementia friend. Special guest Cynthia Ayala of AgeOptions will provide a brief overview of what a dementia friend is and how you can become one. You will learn how to effectively communicate with someone living with Alzheimer's or dementia, in addition to early symptoms of Alzheimer's compared to other signs of aging, and 5 key take-home messages. Sign up for email reminders of future events at www.thrivingwithpride.org. Thanks for watching.